Greetings from India. This presentation explores sensitivities in Indian design education, teaching and learning situations in a modern context. It discusses how today passing on valued knowledge of Indian tradition through bank of design resources and workshops, urban design students can connect with folk artisans. Presentation suggests promoting positive relationships between glorious past of Indian crafts and skills and present culture-hungry social class. It showcases ideas behind advocating culture and history into Indian design education that could positively influence society and encourage indigenous artists. India is a country where culture and history has defined its people. People in India have an inbuilt easy switch on switch off to everything and anything called culture. Actually, we Indians are exposed to culture very early as month old babies. Traditional cradles have had hanging toys tied to its top for babies to enjoy movement and colors since times immortal. Forms, mostly traditional, are introduced right here in this cradle. These toys have beautiful colors and shapes that spin continuously and subconsciously create an understanding of tradition called India. Growing up, girls play with their mummy's saris, and these fabrics add on to the design training. Even I was exposed to various weaves and techniques that I learned in detail later in the design school. In fact, everything in and around an Indian house holds distinct cultural reference as a child's upbringing. I distinctly remember how my grandmother decorated her house with numerous cultural design references during festivals and rituals. I have memories of her decorating the house using rice powder and bright colors during pujas and celebrations. Floor designs called rangoli were always a part of such celebrations. Growing up, I learned that each Indian state had a distinct style and a name too. And even the area around the food plates served used to be decorated with rangolis, sometimes with rice powder, but mostly with flower petals. The food plates too had an artistic connotation. They were always served with an interesting layout. Food items were laid out in a particular manner, utilizing laws of design like domination, repetition, and balance. All this created an impact on my mindset even as I grew up. The inquisitive kid in me always questioned grandmother about this tradition, and she always had a logical or scientific reason with a story from Indian mythology for every ritual. Basically, my generation grew up in a rich cultural setting full of visual references. Indian culture, I suppose, encourages one to improve their creativity and imagination. The rituals that my granny followed were passed on to her by her grandmother and to her by her ancestors. Customs spread across generations because they were beautifully documented by ethnic groups then. Documented on walls, caves, fabrics, paintings, objects, and lots of other expanses, we know these rustic yet beautiful recorded cultural references as the folk art, the Indian folk art. India portrays culture and tradition vibrantly through its arts and crafts for many years. Every region in India has its own identity with distinct style and pattern of the folk art. Distinctly indigenous, these art forms are ethnic, aesthetic, simple, yet colorful and vibrant enough to speak volumes about India. Folk art has always been art of the common people, by the common people, and for the common people. Traditionally self-taught or by learning skills and techniques from their ancestors without formal education, generations have documented celebrations, rituals, functions, and daily life through storytelling, dance, music, and of course food. With naive styles, ignorant of traditional rules of proportion and perspective, these folk art forms have personified social values, conveying their community's authentic cultural identity. And not just restricted to paintings. These art forms are stretched to forms like pottery, wall designs, floor designs, ornaments, fabrics, and other artifacts to make a living out of the local produce. But sadly, the 19th century saw a decline in appreciation of these fabulous Indian folk art forms. Thanks to the Industrial Revolution and the so called global culture, India had opened its doors to the international market. As a result, these beautiful art forms became a dying activity surviving only in isolated areas. They remained a proud tradition of art and making things for themselves, but only to a few tribes. Wall paintings adorned village house walls only. Rangolis were simply drawn outside houses. Festivals were celebrated in paintings only, and daily life sketched just on local walls. Folk art forms remained traditional with no audience or market for art. But on a positive note, this picture is changing. Indian design has undergone a paradigm shift since the last 4 decades. Indian folk art forms are flourishing and gaining interest of audiences today. They have demand and great potential of local and international consumer due to its rustic charm and authenticity. Consumers appreciate traditional designs and demand folk art forms in commercial formats. Today, audiences are eager to own an Indian folk artifact. Now, the mass market culture of traditional artifacts has led to a tremendous demand of the crafts. But then, the authentic works lose out to the mass reproduction of folk art. Thus, changing needs of the modern consumer has transformed and influenced national, cultural, and visual diversity of India. Many designers today collaborate with local artisans and try to fulfill the authentic traditional demand of fashion or accessories. NGOs collaborate with native artisans and attempt to fulfill the specialized market demand too. Government organizes urban hearts to promote local artisans and earn direct revenue. Social media platforms promote local folk art too. The focus is to give folk artists new voice and help revive the folk art tradition. In this fast moving world, the role, impact, and value of design within social and economic sections is larger than agenda. Design actually is a collaborative process between innovation, designer, and the consumer. And through engagement, commitment, and action, design can bring about a true change benefiting the progress. With specialization based design and integrated solution, today's design has become a friendly social process. In the Indian context, there is a specialized folk art design based demand, actually, an enormous demand with various media solutions. Ironically, the visual upbringing somehow has lost way to the modernization and fast paced life. Rituals have become shortcut and festival celebrations less elaborate, losing their rustic charm of yesteryears. Today, the post millennial generation Z is less aware of the deep connotations this rich culture or any of these art forms convey. For them, these folk art inspired products are revenue generating objects of decoration or mere pieces of beautification. And I fear that the meanings will be forgotten with time. Brought up in this modern environment, this generation is less exposed to the rustic beauty of India. This is the point of concern, which as a design teacher I feel should turn an early designer into a communicator, facilitator, and mentor. Today's young generation should understand the local global demand, but also be sensitive towards Indian culture. They should learn from the folk art culture, rework and revoice the designs, but with proper understanding of their cultural backstory. The Indian folk art design demand for young designers should not just be a business of reproduction and replication, but there should also be an involvement of social interest and cultural experience. Teaching various Indian folk art forms through workshops could expose one to and engage meaningful cultures of life. This generation Z could take responsible charge of the glorious past and build a better future for themselves. For almost 2 decades into pedagogy now, I have tried to appreciate this value for design within social spheres. I strongly believe we teachers can positively inspire learners to help revive the traditional art forms. Individual pupils can positively influence groups through design approach practices, cognitive methods and learning strategies, problem solving, and research documentation. Thus, inspiration of culture from within a community could influence from within a nation, ultimately reaching globally. In due course, with fundamental and innovative workshops based on Indian folk art forms could give better exposure to skilled artisans and connect to community values, thereby giving meaning to folk art forms. Thus, introducing the nuances of rich content to present designers could develop media for contemporary audiences. This social media savvy generation, with little attention towards traditional visual celebrations, could engage with hand executed projects, maintaining appeal of the folk art forms, thus bringing a fresh change to the otherwise techno designs. The featured workshops are termed successful mainly because they were set as models, and by retaining parallels, young designers were encouraged to appreciate Indian culture while they were still inexperienced. These workshops have raised considerable curiosity with the undergraduate design students already. Such workshops have a lot of potential to further study their respective folk art form and derive alternative design solutions. As a mentor, I posted one Indian folk art form based Roman alphabet on Instagram every other day to the 36 days of time. These were simple 5-minute rough hand sketches with to the point information about the featured art forms. The purpose was to create curiosity, motivate students to research on their own, and learn the featured folk art form's uniqueness. The trick worked perfectly. Students eagerly awaited for my next post in anticipation that they will get to know one more folk art form. Eventually, many of them started exploring these art forms and made efforts to sketch them too. Conducting hands on workshops in early design classes created interest, provoked curiosity, and made students aware of Indian folk art forms right in the beginning of their design education. By tutoring the style and techniques, these students got an opportunity to explore the forms as they proceeded further in their design education journey. Students were taken to this folk village to study about Ganjifa, a 16th century old art form of colorful circular playing cards, exclusively hand painted even today. They interacted with the local artisan who shared their expertise. Designing their version of Ganjifa cards, students were taught the style and technique in detail. And when they saw their teacher creating a masterpiece herself, they understood its importance all the more. This was the outcome of the workshop. One fabulous hand painted colorful playing card per student. For this particular workshop, students were briefed about Madhubani paintings by sharing with them its history and the basic concepts. By personally demonstrating style and technique to every student, they learned the folk art form by painting their own version of the Madhubani painting. Elementary class students created amazing paintings in the Madhubani style using contemporary themes. You can check my article on Medium for the workshop details. So, what are my observations? Interesting workshops challenges present design students to become conscious of their skills and the rich Indian folk art culture. Students become sensitive designers as they learn to appreciate this rich Indian culture. They realized that Indian tradition, though local, had a wider design charm. They accepted the fact that such designs, however culturally diverse, when properly applied, do have a global appeal. Since artisans execute these art forms by hand even today, students learn to connect with them by executing their own handmade designs. Of course, Wherever required, students did adapt to the digital versions. But by and large, workshops maintained the authenticity of the traditional folk art forms. Students studied the history, background, and meanings behind these folk art forms in detail. They also explored the forms by practicing authentic styles and techniques, at times experimenting with forms, motifs, colors, and the content. In this modern scenario, rustic folk art form designs brought a beautiful change in the otherwise typical design pattern of today. So, to conclude, this generation of young designers can promote positive relationships between glorious past of Indian arts, crafts, skills, and present culture-hungry social class, setting an example and parallel to design students by advocating culture and history into Indian design education can positively influence society and encourage indigenous artists. Folk art is a living discipline which reflects history and tradition. Exposing these art forms to the new generation will keep this tradition alive and teach them to embrace it. Thus, learning from the historical and contemporary design experiences, whatever was designed centuries ago could be redesigned and returned to the world. Thank you.